About to resume. Okay, and we're back. All right, so let me see. Where are we in terms of questions? So let's see. What advice would you give to somebody going to China to teach for the first time? Now, this could be maybe it's, an American student and they just graduated, got their undergrad degree, they got a teaching job in China. They're going to go, first time to China. Maybe it's someone who's taught in America 10 or 20 years, but they want to go try China for a few years. But regardless, a Western person, again, American, Canadian, Australian, British, going to China for the first time to teach, what is some advice you would give them?
Well, I guess if it's about teaching a second language, if this is their first time teaching a second language, I would definitely uh, advise them to take it step by step. Don't get hung up on all the details, especially whenever the students or the younger as the students get. I was working with a guy and he felt like he was teaching incomplete sentences. He said, "What if a professor came in and saw that I was teaching incomplete sentences?" Now, this is in kindergarten. I thought, man, yeah, sure, I totally get where you're coming from. But at the same time, you can't really expect children to uh, get their prepositions right, really get them to understand the adverbs of frequency or whatever, it's just more about them building the skills so that whenever they're taught more detailed lessons, whenever their mind can really absorb everything, then sure, uh, you, what the argument he was making does make sense. But if someone has a let's say an English degree or history degree or some kind of educational degree, and they come here to teach, I would say brace themselves. That's have an open mind because uh, even if that open mind does lead to more negative or I shouldn't say incorrect, but just a limited teaching style or teaching content. I feel like if someone comes here, there is a bit of a reduction
Yeah.
that a teacher has. Now, like I said, I did not experience this because everything was very new to me. Even though I'm teaching the basics of being able to speak English and being able to retain conversational pieces. Um, I feel like anything more than that, if someone came in to teach middle school, high school, um, whatever they had in mind probably did not prepare them for what they're about to experience. Um,
Yeah.
this is what I can't imagine someone with an educational background coming here and teaching and having the same expectation as what they did in their home country. It just I don't see it. So I would just say brace yourself, and and have an open mind. And with my experience, I just stayed in my lane. I didn't try to change any kind of systems or anything like that. If someone comes in there wanting to change educational system that's not really expressed by the administration, that they feel like they want to be of value and that would mean changing the educational system, I think it's going to have a very negative reaction with the administration. So I would just say that uh, it's almost like do what you're told type idea.
Yeah.
Um, don't
Hierarchy
don't go
again.
over there. Right. Don't go over there trying to have big plans. Now, big plans happen. That's all fine and good. That's perfect. But yeah, like you say, hierarchy does play a very strong role. So um, yeah, just have that in mind.
So also I want to ask, and I know you're working with kindergarten, so it might not really be an issue or anything you've ever thought about. But again, most people who've been in China a couple of years come across this. What are some like taboo subjects or topics, like things that people should just not raise or discuss around Chinese students or parents or just Chinese people in general? What are some topics that are best left avoided?
Yeah, I haven't really experienced too much of this. Around students, I don't really have anything to add to that because it seems like the children that I teach that are in my school, they're already uh, free to express themselves, even if it's violent behavior, which children they do get violent, just not in a malicious way, but simply because they don't know how to express their emotions, so they hit
Okay.
you. Um, I feel like maybe with adults. I would say relationships and all of the intertwining activities that come along with that, namely sex and stuff. They don't really uh, feel that it's. I don't want to say like a proper conversational piece or whatever like that, but it's more like if I'm going to be open about what's going on, about what I hate to say it, but yeah, about what I do and everything. To them, that's going to be very hard for them to understand.
Right.
They would be very shocked. So they are very limited when it comes to that regard. But other type of taboo conversations, yeah, I would say any kind of negative thing about the government, they will immediately shoot down.
Yes,
Um,
exactly.
I- I've never really tried that. Like I've had a conversation with someone that was open to listen to me, but I was very careful how I chose my words. Um, but unless you're speaking with someone that also expresses the same idea and they independently and I should say unilaterally gave that idea, then you can kind of express it. But just going out there uh, and expressing without any kind of uh, notions that it was okay, then yeah, I would say that your time here is, or whoever it is, their time here is going to be very difficult. Um, so I wouldn't really talk about the government at all. Um, I wouldn't really talk about any kind of policies or anything like that. But when it comes to maybe entertainment or whatever, yeah, I think they're pretty open to a lot of things. It's just that, yeah, when it comes to those two types, uh, when it comes to the relationships and government, it seems like those two play a strong importance on being negatively perceived. This is my opinion.
And I think part of the reason that they don't like criticism towards the government is again this collectivistic nature that they sort of identify with it, and they almost take it personally, like, oh, if you criticize China or the government, you're criticizing me, and they don't like that. Whereas again, I think in America we deal with criticism all the time. We criticize ourselves, we criticize our government, other people criticize our government, and we don't take it personally. Like, regardless of who's president, if somebody says, I don't like this president or I don't like the previous president or whatever, I just go, oh, okay, that's fine. That's your opinion. I don't take it personally. But I feel like in China, have you heard the phrase glass heart? Have you come across that ever?
Are you referring to like a very weak heart, being able to be offended very easily?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like a Chinese phrase, like their hypersensitivity.
Yeah, I would also say that, like, one example that I knew that I had said something wrong was,
Uh-oh.
someone said, well, the minister of foreign affairs said this and this and this. So they were pretty much saying that it's true because that person said it. And I thought, you don't think he's just a mouthpiece? Like, you just accept everything the person says and that's it? You
Yeah.
don't cross reference any kind of data or examples or whatever. You don't do any other kind of research. You just listen to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and that's it. Once I said that, I knew that the person kind of went quiet a little bit. So I knew that they also had a hard time detaching themselves from the government. Like you say, they are very attached. Like, it's almost like they feel that the government of China is the ethnicity, or the nationality of Chinese
Yeah.
people, and
Yeah.
this is not true. This is so far from the truth. Like, I tell people whenever they do want to engage in a conversation with me about it, I tell them, I say, listen, in which they will criticize my government. Sure, they'll say, oh well, the U.S. Army or the U.S. military did this and do that. I say, yeah, sure. We are covert about it. Like, we will do it in your face. But it seems that China is very sly and sneaky and try to control the
Yes.
narrative of everything. I say this is
Yes.
a huge problem. Like, uh, I was trying. I couldn't really find any kind of information because my VPN wasn't working, about a lot of foreign investments that China is making, about how they are. I guess it's called the Silk Road. I tried to explain this to them, and they could not accept it. They had no idea what was going on. They're like, I would be shocked if my government did this, and I'm like, listen,
Yeah.
wake
Yeah.
up.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. And again, I feel like, yeah, they take things on authority as gospel. Like, if on Monday President Xi says, you know what, I changed my mind. Japan is a pretty awesome country. I could see a lot of people going, okay, well, if that's okay, yeah, because they don't like Japan. But I feel like if the president
Right,
came out,
right, right. Yeah.
but then if the following week he came out and did a 180 and said, you know what, I changed my mind. Japan is evil. Everybody be like, yeah, like it just like lemmings. Whereas again, I feel like in America, whether it's a Democrat or a Republican or Obama or Trump or whoever, president comes out and makes any statement, it's almost like a fraction of the country is going to agree, a fraction is going to be very critical, but not everybody's just going to accept it on the president's authority. And again, you're going to see more individuality and diversity in different groups and discussion and fact check, what's your source, blah, blah, blah. But in China, it's like, no, we all pretty much just accept this, even if it totally contradicts something that was said like last week.
Yeah, no, I could see that happening. Just yeah, I, I can see that happening tomorrow with anything. If whatever the chairman says, um, it's going to be accepted, it's going to be followed, and it's going to be enforced by locals.
Yeah.
It's not going to be enforced by uh, by state agents. It's going to be enforced by the public. So I do find this alarming. But also another thing, I guess this goes back to one of the eye-opening experiences that I've had was about Chairman Mao.
Oh,
Um, here everyone, man, the Chairman Mao is someone with a great deal of importance. Now, I don't know enough about him. I've just learned a brief overview about, the social change, the economic change, and the implications because of it. And I totally get how there can be two sides to this kind of story, but it's almost like you come into a country where everything that you've known before that has always been one, I shouldn't say one-sided, but this is one conclusion. Then you get here and you find out there's a whole different conclusion to it. And you're like, wait a second, my mind can't really comprehend what's going on here. Yeah, I would say that uh, this whole I don't know, strength and authority it's too much, too much. So that's
Well,
why I just stay. I just live my life and that's it.
I feel like with Mao, he was sort of the founder of the modern People's Republic, or whatever the full name is, of China, and like the founder of the Communist Party. And I feel like if he was undermined, or his authority was sort of undermined or delegitimized, then the party would lose face, lose power, mandate of heaven, whatever you want to call it. And so I feel like it's really important for them to sort of maintain this like myth of Mao as this great hero. Whereas, yeah, if you read some history books about him, and I've read a few, I think he was probably worse than like Hitler, Hitler
Oh
and
man.
Stalin, and the funny thing is you talk to like people in Cambodia, and a lot of them would say like, yeah, Pol Pot was an evil man. Or you could talk to people in Eastern Europe, and they would say, yeah, the dictator was horrible.
Right.
Everybody condemns Hitler, but in China somehow, like like it just like they think he's great, and I think
Yeah,
he's one of the. Yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, and yeah, they think he's great, but they don't really offer any kind of substance behind it. They'll say, yes, the where we're at now is because of him. But I shouldn't say that like that's what makes someone so great. Like there has to be more to why this leader had such noble qualities about him. But
Right.
I haven't heard any of it.
Well, and I think a lot of the things that did make life in China better could actually be attributed to Deng Xiaoping. I think he did a lot more good for China than Mao, and I think part of it was because he undid a lot of Mao's like economic policies, for example, and opened up to the West. And he doesn't get as much credit. And I think he was he did more for the country than Mao did. But I also feel like I've probably researched it more than your average Chinese person. I've probably looked into it more and read more uncensored books and accounts than they have access to. And again, I think having access to information and various accounts is really important, because again, as a Western person, what I'm interested in is just truth. Whether it's
Right.
whether it's beautiful or ugly or a combination. That to me, that's so important. I really want to know. And again, that's just something I always come across. And in China, it's like, well, image and face and reputation, and truth is flexible. We're flexible with truth. you know and yeah, that's just where I think there's a fundamental difference. Anyway, let's get towards the end. Let's see. So that would be some advice. What would you say? And again, maybe we've gone in this a little bit, but what would you say are some pros and cons of living, working, teaching in China? Maybe that can be our last question.
Okay, yeah. I definitely think there are a lot of pros living in China. Like, sure, you get to experience a different way of life, different thinking. Like, I'm sure that you're fully aware of the YouTubers that have risen to YouTube fame from
Yes.
living here. Now they live abroad, and they do have a different take on living and working in China. Some would say it's critical, some would say it's objective, some would say it's just outright against China. But I think that as someone lives here in China, they do develop a uh, a full understanding of their own country. I guess, namely myself. But I've heard, from other people, they're like, wow, living here really does kind of open my eyes up to the world. Even for myself, where I would go travel to 15 or so countries before I came here, didn't really give me any kind of true global perspective. Like, sure, you go to Italy, you go to Thailand, you go to the Philippines, you go to Ireland, go to Canada, go to Japan, and you get this kind of global type feel, but there's no real geopolitical understanding because everyone is kind of in accordance with each other. There's no kind of disruption between thoughts. Now, sure, I'm sure there are cultural differences, but in terms of general diplomacy, I don't think there's any kind of issues, no real big issues. But I would say here in China, you really get to see the differences between the two and how it's applied. Uh, and I do see how there are similarities with China and the U.S. And this is something that I do feel like is another benefit. China, they work hard, absolutely. In the U.S., we also work hard too, but we are also given our rights. So I think that I do have some qualities that Chinese do possess as well. Um, when it comes to maybe the negative things that I've experienced, um, yeah, I would say people they will create lies about you. I've had this
Oh,
happen to
okay.
me.
Wow.
Um, simply because I'm a foreigner. Now, I've heard. I'm not sure if you've heard the situation where if a foreigner goes into a Chinese person's house and they see maybe like an artifact or something or a painting or something small, they'll say, "Oh yeah, yeah, I like that. I like that. That's nice." The Chinese person, they would be so nice, they'll give it to you. They'll say, "Oh, here, here, I want you to have it. This is my gift to you." And in our culture, like, no, no, listen, listen, we can't accept that. No, no, no. But Chinese people, they do insist on a lot of things. So let's just say they insist it, and you take it as a gift, as a bridge between the two. The how can I say the um, bonding relationship, whatever. And
Okay.
then you leave with the artifact, and then as soon as you close that door, the Chinese person will say, "Ah, this person took this from my house. They took it from me," without really acknowledging the fact that they gave it to them.
That they
And
insisted.
it was, yeah, it was refused first, and then yeah, like you said, they insisted. So I've seen this kind of situation happen in different ways. I don't want to add too much of my little personal stories, but yeah, I've had people make up stories about me, tell it to my friend, then my friend say, "Hey, is this true?" Obviously not. I'm like, "Listen, I you know
Lots of
what I do
gossip.
day in and day. Yeah, it's ridiculous." Uh, so and they or what happens is they'll or this happened to me. They'll invite you to dinner, uh, and they'll pay for the first time, and then and that's fine. Then they'll invite you to dinner again, and then they'll expect you to pay for the next time without you really even knowing what's going on. Um,
Uh,
and then if you pay, they'll say, the stupid foreigner, stupid foreigner. Foreigner's always going to be wrong in some people's eyes. Doesn't
yeah.
matter if what we do is for it's a benevolent gesture. We're always going to have the downside of the situation. So
And
I would
that's
say
the
that
thing.
that's.
Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say that I was going to end and say, yeah, that's probably the most negative parts about my experiences here.
And what that reminds me of is, again, when I talk with Americans back home or I watch American media or news, I get the sense, and I could be wrong, but I get the sense that a lot of Americans have this misconception that we're this very like racist, xenophobic country and culture. And I've traveled a lot as well, and I feel like we're pretty opening. We're not perfect. We have some bad history. I acknowledge all of that. I don't dismiss it. But yeah, after being in a place like China and being called foreigner and Laowai, many times, and having sometimes, yeah, bad experiences just because I'm a foreigner, it kind of helped me to realize. Because I think growing up, maybe I thought, oh, America, racism is just an American thing. Xenophobia is an American thing. But the more I've traveled, the more I've kind of realized, no, that's not really exclusive to America. That's a human thing.
Yeah, yeah, it is kind of
You'll find that
universal.
right. It's just a human thing, and oftentimes the dominant group or ethnic group, whether it's white or Chinese or whatever, yeah, sometimes they'll maybe suppress or oppress or take advantage of the majority or try to assimilate the minority. Again, in America, there's a lot of like, oh, white people are, bad or did all these things. But again, I look at it as like, well, anywhere I've been where there's like a majority and a minority, usually it just seems to be not a racial thing so much as like a dominant group thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it definitely does, and I think you're right where it is universal, but I think that racism here, it's acknowledged and it's accepted because that goes back to the idea that they don't care about diversity. If they cared about diversity, then they wouldn't be so uh, accepting of it. So.
And that's a good point. Maybe we can finish on this point. I would say again, one difference in my mind, from my observations and experiences, is that yes, maybe both the United States and China acknowledge that racism exists, but I think yeah, the fundamental difference is in America we say racism is bad and we condemn it and we'll call people out for racist behavior, but in China they'll either deny it or if they acknowledge it, they say, yeah, but they don't see it as bad. They don't condemn it. They just say like, well, we're the master race. So of course we're racist. You know, of course we're the best. We're Chinese. Like, we're not going to apologize for that. We're number one. And,
Right.
and so it's just totally different in so many ways.
Yeah, and it's sad to see that too because you know, in my opinion, I really want people to expand their horizons in so many different ways. But this battle is not going to be won in 5 years at what people think. People think, well, China is going to be a superpower, and I guess you could say that in some regards they kind of are a superpower. But in the way that they want their country to be perceived in the world is not going to happen in 5 years. It's not going to happen in this lifetime as things continue to go the way they are. They really have to open their mind to so many different ways before they can really start to be taken seriously and really achieve things on a global level. I think the idea that China is going to be number one with so many different sectors, it's a pipe dream. People, okay, sure, you can have all of the economic metrics, the social metrics, and all this other stuff that really proves a point, but how they respond to the world and how the world responds to them is just as important. I think there are
Especially
policies such as
now, especially
right,
this year.
right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I would say that it definitely hurts whatever progress they thought they were making.
Yeah, they've been getting into it with everybody. India, Australia, United States. I think, yeah, they've had some issues with some European countries as well. And yeah, they got to work again. And I feel like that's some of their isolation and their sort of refusal to adapt sometimes, like just this rigid stubbornness. And it's like, well, you're not everybody's going to play your game. Not every, like, again, I don't feel like sometimes they're really willing to compromise. And the saying I hear is the Han way or the highway. And it's like, that attitude might work. Yeah, when you are the dominant majority and it's your country and you got foreigners coming in, fair enough. We'll play by your rules. But yeah, when you're dealing with the rest of the world, good luck with that. I feel
Right,
like
right.
they don't necessarily understand that so much, and that doesn't really help them. And I think they do need to yeah, kind of evolve in some ways. But that's kind of
Yep,
why
yep.
it's
And
interesting. That's kind of why it's interesting to live there as well, because it's totally different from like living in Thailand or Japan or other places in Asia. China is very unique in many ways.
that is true. And if someone, I always tell people, if it doesn't happen here in the most totalitarian government, don't think it's going to happen in a highly democratic government. I don't think this is a realistic view of things, and I guess I'm thinking of more government control. Uh, that's the topic I was referring to. So I said, look, if I can have this amount of freedom in China, don't think that that freedom is going to be taken away in a democratic government. Because if China feels like they need to take it away, boom, it's gone tomorrow.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Not a lot of debate or discussion about things.
Right.
All right,
So
cool. I think we covered everything that I needed to cover. So thanks for participating, and let me stop the recording.